Have you ever noticed that the silence after a breakup can feel louder than the arguments that ended it? The shouting stops, the tears dry, the door closes, and then nothing. No buzzing phone, no familiar footsteps, just the sound of your own breath in a room that suddenly feels too big. That silence, heavier than the weight of all the words spoken before. People often imagine heartbreak as chaos, screams, slammed doors, messy confrontations. But what lingers after the storm is not noise, it's emptiness. And emptiness has its own way of breaking you. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." After a breakup, that is exactly what happens. You carry stories inside you, memories, fears, hopes that no one else can fully receive anymore. And it feels like being locked inside a house with no windows. But here is the truth most people don't want to hear. Finding peace after a breakup isn't about moving on quickly, pretending you're over it, or rushing into someone new. It's about sitting with that silence long enough to understand what it's trying to teach you. You see, every ending is also an invitation to return to yourself, to step away from the noise of we and rediscover the strength of I. The pain you feel isn't just about losing another person. It's about losing the reflection of yourself you only ever saw through their eyes. That is why silence hurts so much. It forces you to look into the mirror without their presence, shaping your image. And here is the good news. That mirror, as harsh as it seems, is where peace begins. This video is not a guide on how to forget someone. It is a path toward remembering yourself. It's about reclaiming your wholeness after your heart has been fractured. It's about learning that peace is not something you wait for. Peace is something you choose, moment by moment. So as you listen, I invite you not just to consume these words, but to reflect on them. Pause when a sentence touches you. Ask yourself, where in my life is this true? What silence am I still afraid of? And if what I share today resonates with you, I encourage you. Share this message with someone who needs peace too. Like, comment, and subscribe, not just to support this channel, but to become part of a community where healing is honored and wisdom is shared. And stay until the end, because together we will affirm something powerful, something that you can carry into every ending and every new beginning. Because peace is not a destination. Peace is a practice. And today, that practice begins with you, the wound and the mirror. When a relationship ends, people often assume that the pain comes only from losing someone. But if you sit quietly with your grief, you will notice something deeper. The breakup doesn't just tear you away from another person. It tears you into pieces with yourself. Why? Because every relationship is a mirror. Think about it. When you looked into their eyes, you weren't only seeing them. You were seeing the parts of yourself you longed to be recognized. The playful child you had forgotten. The lover who wanted to feel desired. The vulnerable soul that hoped to be safe. They reflected those hidden sides of you back to you until the day they left. And when the mirror shatters, you are left with fragments. You don't just lose them. You lose the version of yourself that only existed in their presence. That's why the grief feels bottomless. You are mourning not only a person, but also a piece of your own identity. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The same is true in love. Everything we adore in others often points to the parts of ourselves we've abandoned." That's why breakups can feel like death. It isn't just the end of us. It's the collapse of the fragile self you built through someone else's eyes. So here's the uncomfortable question. Are you crying for them? Or are you crying for the part of yourself that you cannot yet stand to face alone? It is tempting, after heartbreak, to blame the other person, to replay the story of betrayal, neglect, or disappointment. But Jung's psychology invites us to a different path, not projection, but integration. Every wound is an invitation to look at the shadow, the unclaimed part of ourselves that we tried to outsource to someone else. For example, if you always needed their reassurance, maybe it is the abandoned child in you that craves safety. If you loved their confidence, maybe it is your own silenced strength that is begging to be awakened. If you feared losing them more than anything, maybe it is because you feared facing the emptiness inside yourself. A breakup doesn't create new wounds. It simply reveals the ones you've been carrying all along. And here lies the paradox. The person who hurt you may also have been the one who unconsciously pointed you back towards your unfinished healing. They are gone, but the mirror remains. Shattered, yes, but waiting for you to pick up the pieces. This is the real work of peace, not rushing into distractions, not stitching over the scar with false affirmations, but looking into that broken mirror and asking, what part of me have I been afraid to love without someone else's permission? You may not like what you see. The reflection may look messy, needy, even fragile. But Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, peace begins when you stop running from the wound and start listening to it. And here is the strange gift. When you finally face your reflection without shame, the mirror no longer belongs to them. It belongs to you. So the next time you feel that hollow ache in your chest, remember this. You are not broken because they left. You are simply being asked to face the mirror they once held up for you. And in that reflection lies the first glimpse of your true self, the self that no breakup can ever take away. Why peace escapes us? If peace is what we crave after heartbreak, why does it always seem to slip through our fingers? Why, even when the storm is past, do we still feel restless, haunted, and unsettled? The truth is, most of us fall into three invisible traps that steal our peace after a breakup. The second trap is substitution, jumping quickly into a new relationship, hoping someone else will cover the wound. Maybe you've done this before. The rebound, the quick fix, the desperate attempt to prove that you're still lovable. At first, it feels like healing. Someone new texts you. They laugh at your jokes. They hold your hand. For a moment, you believe you're whole again. But underneath, the wound is still bleeding, only hidden behind a fresh bandage. Substitution doesn't give you peace. It delays the pain. And when the bandage falls off, the wound is deeper because it has been ignored. Jung teaches that individuation, the process of becoming whole, cannot be achieved through another person. You cannot outsource your healing. You cannot rent peace from someone else's arms. The third trap is resistance, denying the pain altogether. This is when you tell yourself, I'm fine, I don't care, they didn't matter anyway. But the truth leaks out in your body, in the tightness of your chest, in the heaviness in your shoulders, in the sudden tears when you hear a certain song. Resistance feels strong, but it's actually fear in disguise. When you suppress grief, it doesn't vanish. It buries itself deeper, waiting for the next trigger to erupt. As Jung reminds us, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. By resisting sorrow, you also resist the growth it brings. Peace escapes us not because it is far away, but because we are running in the wrong direction. Rumination ties us to the past. Substitution distracts us in the present. Resistance blocks the future. Imagine trying to heal a broken bone while running a marathon. You never give the wound the stillness it needs to mend. That's what these traps do. They keep us moving, but never healing. So ask yourself honestly, are you trapped in the endless rerun of what if? Are you hiding your grief inside someone else's body? Are you wearing the mask of strength while your soul quietly bleeds? Because the first step toward peace is not about doing more. It's about seeing the traps clearly and choosing to step out of them. And once you see the traps for what they are, a new possibility emerges. Stillness. Stillness that doesn't come from distraction, denial, or desperation, but from the courage to sit with your pain and listen to what it has to say. That is where we are headed next. Choosing stillness over noise. When the heart aches, the instinct is almost always the same. Fill the silence. Turn on the TV. Scroll endlessly through social media. Call a friend just to talk about anything but the pain. Or worse, text the very person who broke you, hoping that one more conversation will numb the ache. But peace does not grow in noise. Noise is distraction. Peace is presence, and presence requires stillness. Why does stillness scare us so much? Because in stillness, the truth becomes too loud to ignore. When you sit alone in a quiet room, suddenly the grief speaks, the loneliness whispers. The questions you've been avoiding knock on the door of your mind. So we run back to the noise, thinking it will protect us. But really, it only delays the encounter. It's like covering a mirror with a cloth. Your reflection doesn't disappear. It just waits for you to be brave enough to look again. Carl Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the essence of stillness, making space for the darkness without trying to silence it. What does that look like in practice? Sitting in your room without reaching for your phone, letting the emotions rise and fall like waves. Writing a letter you will never send, pouring out every unspoken word until the paper itself feels heavy with release. Taking a long walk with no music, no distractions, only the sound of your own steps grounding you back into the earth. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the presence of awareness. Think of it this way: distraction is escape. Stillness is confrontation. Distraction numbs. Stillness heals. Distraction postpones the pain. Stillness transforms it. And here's the paradox. The very thing you fear, sitting with your sorrow, is the very thing that will free you from it. Pain demands to be felt, but only fully felt pain can finally loosen its grip. What happens if you stop running? If you stop talking over your grief? Stop drowning it in playlists and parties and temporary fixes? At first, silence will roar like thunder, but eventually, if you stay long enough, the roar softens into whispers. And those whispers carry wisdom. You might hear the voice of the child in you, saying, "Please don't abandon me again." You might hear the voice of your future self, saying, "This ending is not your destruction, it's your beginning." You might even hear the faint echo of Jung's insight. Peace does not come from adding more to your life, but from subtracting the illusions you no longer need. You don't have to retreat into the mountains or meditate for hours a day. Stillness begins in small rituals, lighting a candle before bed and sitting in the quiet glow. Taking 3 deep breaths before answering your phone. spending 10 minutes journaling your truth, even if it's ugly, raw, and unpolished. Every small ritual of stillness teaches your nervous system that silence is not an enemy, it's a teacher. So I ask you now, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be still? Not scrolling, not searching, not begging for closure, but simply being present with what is. Because until you choose stillness over noise, peace will always escape you. But the moment you do, when you finally let silence become your companion instead of your enemy, you begin to taste something rare, a softness, a groundedness, a peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. That peace is the seed. And in the next step of this journey, we will talk about how to water it, how to reclaim the personal power that heartbreak often steals. Reclaiming personal power. There comes a moment after the silence, after the crying, the numbness, the restless nights, when you realize something profound. The breakup didn't just take away a person, it took away your power. Think about it. How many times did you shape your day around them? How many times did you silence your own needs just to keep the peace? How many dreams, hobbies, or small pleasures did you abandon because they didn't fit into the story of us? When the relationship ends, it feels like the ground has been pulled from under you. But in reality, you've been standing on someone else's ground for far too long. The breakup only exposed how far you drifted from your own center. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Breakups hurt so much because they strip away the false identity you built around another person, leaving you face to face with yourself. The self you neglected, the self you postponed, the self you siled. One of the hardest shifts after a breakup is moving from we back to I. It feels unnatural at first. Saying my plans instead of our plans. Cooking dinner for one instead of two. Walking into a room without a hand to hold. But here lies the hidden gift. In the absence of we, you get to rediscover who I really is. What do you like to eat? Not what they liked. What music makes your soul come alive? Not what they put on the playlist. What dream did you put on the shelf because you thought love required you to choose? These small rediscoveries are not trivial. They are acts of reclamation. Each one returns a piece of yourself back into your hands. Personal power is not some grand explosion of confidence. It's built in small choices. Saying no when your body screams no instead of people-pleasing. Going for a walk because you need it, not because someone else suggested it. Rearranging your home so it feels like your sanctuary again, not a museum of shared memories. These choices seem minor, but they rebuild the foundation of self-trust. And self-trust is the soil where peace grows. The danger after a breakup is that you look outward for confirmation. Am I still attractive? Am I still lovable? Do I still matter? But every time you hand those questions to someone else, you surrender your power again. Jung would call this projection, placing your own unclaimed qualities into others, hoping they'll hand them back to you. But they never can. They never will. Only you can reclaim what you lost. So the work is not asking others to prove your worth. The work is choosing, daily, to live as if your worth is unquestionable. Because it is. Jung's great vision was individuation, the process of becoming a whole, undivided self. Heartbreak, as devastating as it feels, is often the doorway into this process. Because when the person you leaned on disappears, you are forced to stand on your own legs. And for the first time, you begin to realize they were strong all along. To reclaim your personal power is not to deny the love that was lost. It is to honor it and then recognize that you were never incomplete without it. Love may enrich you, but it does not define you. Tonight, when you sit in silence, I invite you to do something small yet profound. Write down 3 things you once loved that you abandoned for the sake of the relationship. It could be as simple as painting, dancing, traveling, or spending time with certain friends. And then choose one. Just one. Commit to it this week. Because every time you return to something that was yours before them, you reclaim a piece of your soul. So let me ask you now, are you still waiting for someone else to hand your life back to you? Or will you take it in your own hands, piece by piece, choice by choice? Because peace is not passive. Peace is powerful. And every act of self-return is an act of power. The breakup may have shattered the we, but in its aftermath, you are being given the rarest opportunity to meet yourself again, to see your reflection not in someone else's eyes, but in your own. And once you stand in that power, heartbreak no longer defines you. It refines you, transforming suffering into wisdom. Suffering has a strange way of making you believe it is the end. The sleepless nights, the empty mornings, the heavy silence. Every fiber of your being whispers, "This is permanent. I will never feel whole again." But suffering is rarely an ending. More often, it is a beginning disguised as loss. In every ancient culture, pain was understood as initiation. The warrior was scarred before he was honored. The mystic fasted in solitude before he found enlightenment. The healer faced her own wound before she could touch the wounds of others. Breakup pain is no different. It is your initiation into a deeper version of yourself. The ache in your chest is not only grief, it is a threshold. The question is, will you step through it, or will you cling to the doorway, weeping for what is already gone? Carl Jung reminds us there is no coming to consciousness without pain. If you try to avoid the ache, you also avoid the awakening hidden inside it. Think of the snake. To grow, it must shed its old skin. But shedding is not comfortable. It is tight, itches, burns. For a time, the snake rubs itself raw against stones and branches, fighting with its own body until the old skin finally tears away. This is suffering. And just like the snake, your suffering is a shedding. The version of you that only existed through someone else's approval can no longer survive. You are being asked to grow beyond it. Even if the process scrapes you raw. Most people ask in heartbreak, "Why did this happen to me?" But wisdom begins when you ask instead, "What is this trying to teach me?" Perhaps it is teaching you boundaries, how to say no without fear. Perhaps it is teaching you self-worth, that you deserve love that doesn't shrink you. Perhaps it is teaching you resilience, that even in breaking, you can rise again. The pain doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to redirect you. Every wound carries a message, but only if you listen. The wound of betrayal may be teaching you to trust yourself before you trust anyone else. The wound of abandonment may be teaching you that your own presence is the one you can never lose. The wound of rejection may be teaching you that your worth is not negotiable. If you ignore these lessons, the wound festers. If you face them, the wound becomes wisdom. Jung called this process individuation, the path of becoming whole by integrating the parts of yourself you once denied. Heartbreak brings those denied parts screaming to the surface. And though it feels unbearable, it is also your chance to reclaim them. Transformation sounds poetic, but it is also practical. Here are a few ways to turn suffering into wisdom. Journaling patterns. Instead of writing only about the person you lost, write about the pattern you repeated. Ask, What was I seeking in them that I have denied in myself? Therapeutic dialogue. Speak to your pain as if it were a person. Ask it what it wants, what it fears, what it is protecting you from. Creative expression. Paint, dance, sing or write not to perform, but to release. Creation is how the soul metabolizes what the mind cannot explain. Pain is energy. If you don't transform it, it stays stuck. But if you give it form, words, colors, movement, it shifts into wisdom. So let me ask you, are you clinging to your pain as proof that you were once loved? Or will you let that pain become the fire that forges your strength? Because here's the truth. Suffering will either shrink you or expand you. The choice is yours. And when you finally allow pain to teach you, something miraculous happens. The grief doesn't vanish, but it softens. It becomes less of a wound and more of a scar that tells a story, not of what you lost, but of who you became. One day, you will wake up, breathe in the morning air, and realize that the ache is still there, but different. It no longer crushes you. Instead, it hums quietly, like a distant reminder of where you've been. And in that moment, you will know your suffering has become your wisdom, and with wisdom comes a new horizon, the ability to love again, but from wholeness, not from need. That is where we will go next. Love beyond relationships. For most of us, love begins as a search. We look outward, scanning the world for someone to complete us, someone to quiet the loneliness, someone to reflect back the beauty we cannot yet see in ourselves. This is why breakups feel like death, because when the person leaves, it feels like the completion left with them. But what if love was never meant to complete you? What if love, at its highest form, is not salvation, but expression? Carl Jung wrote about the anima and animus, the inner feminine in men and the inner masculine in women. His insight was simple yet profound. Every love you experience awakens the part of yourself you have not yet claimed. This is why we fall for certain people. We sense in them a missing piece of us. Their confidence mirrors the courage we've silenced. Their gentleness reflects the tenderness we've buried. Their passion awakens the fire we forgot we carried. But here's the danger. When we mistake attraction for completion, we place our wholeness in someone else's hands. And when they leave, we believe the wholeness has left too. The truth is different. What they awakened in you was always yours. Their leaving does not take it away. It simply asks you to carry it yourself. There are two ways people enter relationships: to escape loneliness, to express fullness. The first creates attachment, dependency, fear. The second creates freedom, depth, expansion. Ask yourself honestly, did you love them to fill your emptiness or to share your abundance? When love becomes an escape, the end feels unbearable because you've lost your shield against your own void. But when love is an expression, the end, though painful, does not strip you of yourself because you were whole before and you remain whole after. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That is the work after heartbreak, to stop outsourcing your worth and to begin loving yourself in ways no partner ever could. This doesn't mean narcissism or arrogance. It means sitting with your imperfections and still saying, "I am enough." It means nurturing your own body with rest, your own mind with silence, your own heart with gentleness. Because when you cultivate this wholeness within, relationships no longer become survival. They become celebration. You are not begging for completion. You are sharing your fullness. Love is not limited to romance. It exists in 1,000 forms, if only you allow yourself to see it. It exists in the way sunlight warms your skin on a winter morning, in the laughter of a friend who knows your scars and still calls you beautiful, in the quiet comfort of making tea, pouring it into your favorite cup, and taking the first slow sip. Love is not somewhere out there. It is here, in the small rituals of presence, in the gentle noticing of life itself. So I ask you now, what if the love you lost was never meant to be kept? What if their role was simply to awaken in you the capacity to love more deeply? Not just another person, but yourself, your life, your existence. Because love beyond relationships is not a replacement for what you lost. It is the realization that love was never lost in the first place. It only changes form. When you live in the illusion that love comes only through a partner, every ending feels like scarcity. But when you awaken to the truth that love is everywhere, in yourself, in others, in the world, then heartbreak no longer leaves you empty. It leaves you open. And from that openness, you become ready for a new horizon, not a desperate grasping for love, but an intentional, conscious choice of how to love and whom to love next. That is where we now turn. The new horizon. Every ending creates a horizon. It feels like the line where your world stops, where nothing lies beyond. But horizons are illusions. If you take one more step, what seemed like the end suddenly unfolds into a beginning. A breakup is not a wall. It is a horizon. When love collapses, most people swear they'll never open their heart again. Why risk it? Why walk into fire when you've already been burned? That fear is natural. It is the echo of the wound still tender. But remember, fear is not truth. Fear is a memory pretending to be a prophecy. If you let it rule you, you build a prison out of your past. But if you face it step by step, the horizon opens into a path you never imagined you could walk. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Your heartbreak is not just suffering, it is initiation. It forced you into a deeper awareness of yourself, your patterns, your shadows. Think of it this way. You did not fail in love. You graduated from one chapter of your soul's curriculum. The diploma is not a certificate on paper. The diploma is your new awareness, the ability to see where you once were blind, to choose where you once reacted, to create where you once clung. Now comes the moment only you can decide. Will you keep circling the old patterns, returning to relationships that repeat the same wound? Or will you step into the unknown, the new horizon, with the wisdom you've earned? The first option is familiar, but it keeps you small. The second option is terrifying, but it makes you free. And freedom, ultimately, is what peace requires. So what does the new horizon look like? It's not rushing into the next romance to prove you're lovable. It's not numbing yourself with distractions until pain becomes background noise. It's standing still long enough to listen to your soul whisper, "I am ready for something different." From there, the horizon becomes less about who you will meet and more about who you are becoming, because the quality of your next love will never exceed the quality of the relationship you have with yourself today. Imagine walking toward that horizon with a new compass, not desperation, not fear, but peace. Peace doesn't mean you'll never feel lonely again. It means you'll no longer betray yourself just to avoid loneliness. Peace doesn't mean the absence of desire. It means the presence of discernment, knowing when a connection expands you and when it drains you. With that compass, you no longer beg love to stay. You invite it. And if it leaves, you remain whole. So let me leave you with a declaration. I am not defined by who left me. I am defined by what I choose now. I choose stillness over chaos. I choose wisdom over repetition. I choose love, not as escape, but as expression. And above all, I choose my peace. This is the power of the new horizon. It is not about forgetting the past, but about walking forward without being chained to it. Peace. If these words resonate with you, if you feel even a small spark of freedom awakening inside, carry this message with you. Share it with someone who is struggling, because healing multiplies when it is given away. And if you found value here, I invite you to join this journey with me. Like this video, leave a comment with your own affirmation, subscribe for more reflections, and tap the bell so you won't miss the next step on this path. Remember, the horizon is not the end. It is the beginning, and the beginning is yours.